Hi everyone, welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. Today I'm excited. My new friend Mike Foster with me, and Mike is the entrepreneur's mentor, and he's a recent re-author. So second book, fair warning, Mike, the second book is where the addiction kicks in. So there's a third book, whether you know it or not. Kindly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. So as you say, my personal brand is the Entrepreneur's Mentor. I've been a business coach stroke mentor for 14 years after running my own businesses for just over a decade. I say businesses because I had 6 of my own businesses and actually ran 4 of them at once at one point, in the entrepreneur in me. But that was ultimately seeing opportunities and getting good people around me to run those businesses. And that suited my diverse brain because I liked splitting between the businesses, and therefore I could be an accountant one day, I could be a marketeer the next day, I could be in my costume as a 6-foot orange squirrel for my indoor soft play centre the next day if I wanted to. And ultimately, when I sold out of those businesses in 2013, I decided I wanted to become a business coach, again to suit that diversity of seeing a different business with a different goal, with a different objective, with a different challenge every single day. And again, it suited me as a character, but also I felt I had something to share with those businesses because of the journeys that I'd been on, and something I felt very real that I could share, rather than, unfortunately, some people sign up to business coaches, and sometimes we get a bad name because they sign up to people who have never actually ran a business and have got a toolkit of the things that you could do. And don't have any necessary experience to share. And I guess that's why I positioned myself in the end as being a mentor, because I felt I could be a coach who would ask you those great questions. Well, how would you do that? And what do you think you should do? Or I could be a consultant where I'd go in and do it for people. Or actually I position myself in the middle where I do coach people, but ultimately if I feel they need something from me to fuel or spark their ideas or their journey, then I'll give them a case study, I'll give them some of my experience.
I love that. And personally, I think one of my favorite questions, I deal with a lot of coaches, and I always ask them, what was your biggest failure? Because if they can't give me one, I know they read it, learned it in the textbook, and it's all shelf help, as I like to call it. Now, you recently published a book, and part of the reason you and I met was you wanted to talk about the book. So first of all, tell us the name of the book and tell us how it came to be.
Yeah, so the book is the Financial Times Guide to Starting a Business. It was launched towards the end of 2025, and it's published by a company called Pearson on behalf of the Financial Times. And I was approached because their author who'd written the startup guides before was retiring. They were looking for a new author. And my understanding, it's never been 100% confirmed, but my understanding is they lent in because of the content that I'd shared for the market for over the last sort of 4 years. I share a weekly blog, a weekly video, weekly knowledge-based article. And I think they lent into the content and felt that was very relevant. So I was approached if I would be prepared to write the new startup guide.
I love that. And what was your biggest takeaway as you were writing this? Because I'm sure there's a famous quote, and I can't remember who said, "Excuse the length. If I had more time, this would be shorter." What were the lessons you learned while you were cutting? Because I'm guessing 14 years of wisdom was hard to narrow down to one book.
Yeah, well, I was actually given a target which I exceeded by 15,000 words. And then when I started to cut it, I was struggling to cut it. So the publishers reviewed the content and felt themselves that they couldn't cut the page numbers. So actually what we ended up doing is publishing a larger book than they thought they were going to publish in the first place. In terms of structure, I was very keen, and I always say this to any of my clients, is that you are not your own customer. So I basically created some focus groups to start with. First of all, as seasoned entrepreneurs, as I said to them, if you were starting your own business today, knowing what you know, what would you want to know about? And then I had another focus group with some startup entrepreneurs and said, okay, what support do you need to help you in the next few months in terms of your journey, in terms of starting your business? And because I, again, blended what the feedback I got from both those audiences, I believe I got a relevant guide from, obviously the structure to what to include in terms of each chapter from that perspective.
I love it. Now let's talk about what's actually in the book, because I think that's what's exciting. I think a lot of people might say, well, starting a business, okay, it's not for me. But one of the things I've found is entrepreneurs are fascinating. We're very resilient, so we don't mind stepping out on the limb, falling on our faces, getting up. What was the first piece of advice you gave in the book that you think most people listening probably should hear again, or maybe sadly for the first time?
It's interesting what you just say there, Jeff, because I could have written a very standard startup book, which is, this is your marketing, this is your sales, this is your numbers. And I think one of the things that the publisher quite liked about my content, and the reason why it was put into the Financial Times Guide to Start Your Business as the first chapter, is about mindset and preparation. Because I think you're quite right, Jeff. I think when we're entrepreneurs and when we're in it, and we're loving what we're doing, we become resilient, and we become factual in terms of what the journey looks like, because we're very attached to what the objectives are. We know the journey from A to B is not going to be a straight line. There's many ups and downs. But actually, when we're thinking about the business, and perhaps we're coming from the safe aspect of having a job and being paid as a job, the things about what we may procrastinate on are things that impact are we ready? Do we have that entrepreneurial mindset? Are we prepared to be resilient when we need to be resilient? Or would I rather just sit in a job and be paid for what I do?
It's funny. I was interviewed on, it was a career podcast, and usually they interviewed, as he called it, regular people with regular jobs. And he asked me what the biggest training was for me to be an entrepreneur. And I said, well, honestly, it was just being able to fall on my face and get up, dust myself up, and keep moving. And I think I think in the employment world, if you get something wrong, it's considered failure, and we need to discuss your performance. Being an entrepreneur, it's feedback, and how can we not fall on our face next time?
Yeah, and I think again, that's certainly one of the messages I share in the first chapter, is because I think it's very easy to, again, if we're employed, if I might not be found out being an employee, so I just hide here. Whereas there's nowhere to hide when you're an entrepreneur. If you do things wrong, and okay, yes, I agree with 100% with what you just said. We never fail or anything. Everything's a learn. But ultimately, if we make too many fails as an entrepreneur, that's gonna make things very difficult for us from maybe a financial perspective, or even a mental perspective, in terms of we've had so many knocks that we don't want to get back up again from the third down, etc. So I think certainly the key things, the first chapter is ultimately about entrepreneurial mindset. It's all about, are you actually ready to become an entrepreneur? And actually giving people things like checklists, and delving a little bit deeper into their emotion in terms of, are they feeling ready?
And I think that's, if I see this over in North America in particular, but I'm sure it's in the UK. When there's big shifts in the economy, people quit their corporate jobs and they go out and hang a shingle and say, I'm a consultant. And then when the economy picks back up, or when the economy drops, they go back and be an employee. I think a lot of them never, ever quite considered the safety net that you're accustomed to as an employee. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think 100%. And again, it's just being mindful of I'm a big believer that if we know the obstacles we're likely to face, we've got more chance of avoiding them, because we can plan around them. If we're not honest ourselves in terms of where our starting point is and where we currently are in terms of our journey, our travel, then ultimately we're not going to see the obstacles as clearly as we'd like to. And I always say it when I'm doing my goal planning with my clients, very, very often, and I talk about this in the book, is I say that, very often goal planning is, what do I want to achieve? Where am I now? And what date do I want to achieve it by? And I start running towards the goal, and then I hit a brick wall. And when I hit that brick wall, I bounce off, because I'm going to bail out here now. If we think about weight loss or whatever I think it may be, I'm not losing weight, can't get away, bail out. So ultimately, what I say to people is, well, first of all, do the easy bit. Think about all the things that are going to stop you from achieving your goal. Easy list. This is going to stop me. This is going to stop me. This is going to stop me. Okay. Now write a solution to each and every one of those obstacles. And then when you've got the solutions to each one of those obstacles, then build that into your action plan. Because if you deal with these solutions, the majority of the time, the problems won't occur.
I love that. And for what it's worth, Mike, that's kind of my philosophy in life, because I look at things and say, how could this fail? And it turns out that one of my favorite people, Charlie Munger, that was always his approach, was where can this go wrong? And also I'm obsessed with NASA and space, and I figure their mindset is, let's assume everything that can break will break, and then they have backup and backup plans. And personally, I think it's the exercise of thinking of the solutions that makes us more resilient.
100%. Yeah, and again, I think those, if the problems that we thought were going to occur, the obstacles do occur, then because we've already considered them, they don't feel as vast as they may be. If we're not prepared for them and they suddenly come around and slap us around the face, then we go into procrastination mode. We go into I'm failing mode, i.e. the mental mindset. We go into I'm not good enough mode, etc. We start looking at other people that are succeeding and have got around the problem, but I'm facing the problem, and that puts me into a different mindset.
I love that. And one of the things I'm obsessed with is I think a lot of entrepreneurs, because we're head down and we're grinding, we think we're alone. I think early on, for me, I recommend to people have that support group, because when you do hit an obstacle that's bigger than your imagination, it helps to have somebody else who says, why don't you just walk around it?
Yeah, 100%. And again, early stage of the book, I get people to think about who their network is. Is it directly their family? Is it their loved one or loved ones? Is it their business partner? Is it their team? Is it their suppliers? Is it their customers? Is it their business network? Who are they going to lean on when things don't feel? And who are they going to be comfortable to lean on? Because again, sometimes I say it in terms of the book, is that if sometimes we want to have a conversation, but there may be people we don't feel comfortable have that conversation with. So, I've you mentioned earlier, I've had a near business failure with an indoor soft play center I had. And there was days when I was watching the weather, I was watching the cash flow at the same time and hoping it was going to rain so that people would come indoors and, and then balancing that through. But I didn't really, my wife was my business partner. We didn't really have that conversation. I hid that from her. I didn't want to talk to my team, anybody in my team about it. And I didn't want to talk to those in my network necessarily about it, because I didn't want to be seen as a near failure to it. So again, we've got to really work out who we can trust in our network to lean into. And I had two people. One was my historic mentor. He's been my mentor, for now sort of near 30 odd years, that I lent into and said, can I talk this through with you? And one was another person in my network that just felt comfortable talking to things.
I love that. And I want to pull out something, because you mentioned early on that you believe in being a mentor. I think there are places for coaches. We should all look at where our weaknesses are and have coaches. But I also believe I am always open to being a mentor and mentoring others, because being mentored by others, because it's a different level of perspective. And if you want to get through those little humps in life, the little spots, you always want to have somebody who can share the wisdom of, here's how I did it. But you also have to be open to listening.
100%. And I think, again, it's very linked in terms of what we've just been talking about, because I think the clients I work with as a direct one-to-one coach, mentor, is I'm actually mentoring them because they don't have other people they can necessarily turn to or have these type of conversations with, because they would see it as a failure in terms of internally the business and lose trust of their people, they feel, or again, lose face with their business network. So again, 100% echo in terms of that. And I think, like I say, as I said earlier, my role, I think, as a business mentor is to share some of this age wisdom that I have, the experience that I've actually been and ran sort of 6 of my own businesses, had a near failure. And I think when I talk to people, people can understand that I relate to them. I'm not just reciting something from a book or something I've read or watched on YouTube or something like that.
I won't name names, but I once had a coach during a session. He was reminding himself of the acronym that he was about to use on me, and he was saying it out loud. And I'm like, I have zero faith in you right now.
Yeah. Well, again, I've won a lot of work from, again, we talked about people in the employed world. They become a consultant or a coach, and they brought a franchise and they've got a toolkit, and they can recite the toolkit, but they can't personalize it. And I've won a lot of work in the past by I guess being able to personalize content.
You'll love this. Mikey actually pulled out the bookmark from the weekend seminar he took and showed me, and I went, "Oh God, I'm going to give you some free business coaching right now."
Did the bookmark have the acronym on it?
Did, yes, yeah. He even gave me one. I was like, so why do I need you if the bookmark's smarter than you? Yeah. Now, for the record, I believe in coaches, and I believe most coaches have hearts of gold. But I'm also one of those, if you don't have scrapes and scars and bruises, I'm not really putting my faith in you. And, I've met a couple of 20-something business coaches, and I'm like, come back when you got some gray hair or gray whiskers, because life's going to show you some things that you don't know right now.
I've got plenty of those, Jeff.
I like to say I've earned every one of them. So
100%.
All right. Well, now let's talk about the rest of the book. So, who are you hoping is going to serve this? Because one of the things I want to make sure and pull out, this is not a book for starting a business in the UK. I don't see that on the end. So this is kind of a global, general, wise wisdom sort of book. Is that fair?
That's fair to say, yeah. We do reference UK taxes, but obviously with a disclaimer that there is other taxes around the world to worry about. And I guess even if you're a UK business, then you're going to have to be mindful of the worldwide taxes as we sit in the economies nowadays. But yeah, and it's been written. I think it's been written, and I think a lot of the comments I've received so far, a lot of the testimonials and reviews I've had, is that people feel that it's not just a book for startups; it's a book for entrepreneurs in general. It's that sort of go-to guide, if you like, and that's what I've tried to capture, that wisdom that we talked about earlier, that experience, that knowledge that I have, to basically write a guide that would be relevant. So yeah, it is applicable. It can be purchased around the world in different copies, for sure. And as I say, it's not particularly just for startups, although obviously it's geared for the startup market.
Well, if I may, I think one of the things I see is a lot of entrepreneurs who got a great idea, got really excited, started their business. Now they're reaching, it's almost always somewhere around $1 million. That's not the threshold, but it's the spot where they're starting to realize my grit is going to go so far, but probably not further. And I need to start building that team. I think that's a good spot for people to stop, and because it's not like we go through school and we get a degree and we come out and we say, okay, we're ready to be an entrepreneur. Usually we're annoyed by something. We come out and say, I can do this better, or I'm smarter than that person. I'm going to go start my own. So I feel like there's some wisdom there for people who are leveling up, because there's stuff we don't learn in whatever it is when we start up, because grit will get you a long ways before you start to trip on your own grit.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, ultimately the statistics show us that most businesses are started by technicians of their business, not entrepreneurs. It's the good old E-myth by Michael Gerber, isn't it, in terms of technician to manager to entrepreneur to investor. And I think, I think when you're a technician and you're striving for, I guess, excellence in terms of what it is that you do, we're never trained to be an entrepreneur, to look at all those other hats that we have to wear. Now, as a startup, we have to wear all those hats unless we have the resources to hire early. And that's, again, one of the things in the book I encourage people to think about, when that right hire needs to be and who that right hire should be. Because I've worked with very many organizations that have hired the wrong people. They've in effect replaced what they were brilliant at in their business with other people, and then they've said, oh, now I've got to manage people. I'm not very good at managing people, am I? Well, why didn't you hire someone to manage your people and you carry on doing what you're doing, for example? So again, who's your first hire, who's the right hire, for example, would be certainly one of the things within the book. But it's again, coming back to your point, it's again thinking about that sort of journey that people are going to take. And the idea really was to say, okay, well, we've got some key factors in terms of running a successful business that we're not trained for as entrepreneurs. That's understanding our numbers financially, because many entrepreneurs run to the hills when you talk about numbers, and try and avoid them. And I'm not talking necessarily just about the numbers that shows up in your accounts. I talk very strongly in the book about the real key numbers in your business, the numbers that drive the success of your business, the activities as well as the outputs. There's the sales and there's the marketing expertise. And in the marketing, we talk about your different audiences, not just the audiences that are going to obviously be searching for you, but even your unaware audience, your cold audience that aren't necessarily looking for you right now. And again, if you're not trained or you're not qualified or experienced in marketing, that's an area as an entrepreneur you're going to miss out on. So the idea really with the guide is to get everybody to a level of thinking.
I love that. And, for what it's worth, I could write several volumes of books on mistakes I've made because I'm stubborn and wanted to learn it myself. I'll share one I think you'll find amusing. I read Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy's Who Not How, and I missed a subtle key point. So I was the how guy. I could figure how out. So I was always trying to figure out, I was the technician. And then I read Who Not How, and I was like, okay, I need who's. So then I missed a key chapter. I think I skipped it or skimmed it. I went and hired as many people as I could. I hired 9 people at once, all cheap labor from the Philippines. And it was like I was all of a sudden a swarm of mosquitoes in my head because none of them knew what to do and I didn't know how to manage them. And I missed the minor phrase, unique ability. And when I reread it, I went, oh, crap. But, entrepreneur, I rush in and then, oops, the building's on fire. Stop putting it out.
And there's a prime example about many entrepreneurs don't like their numbers, avoid the numbers, have never been trained correctly about their numbers. So therefore, when they hire as cheaply as they can. And therefore that might be outsourcing or offshoring. That may be hiring somebody at a lower level than you really need. And they take the wrong tasks away from you. And again, I talk about hiring A players. If we can hire A players that are better than ourselves, then they'll make money for us. Ultimately, they'll make money for us.
I love that. And one thing you mentioned that I want to roll back to because I think it's critical. You mentioned that a lot of entrepreneurs, we hire like us, and then we wonder why we're still in trouble. So let's pull out that distinction. So a lot of entrepreneurs are high quick start, low fact finder. So what would a high fact finder, a high quick start, what would a good first hire probably be in your opinion?
I think probably the one I can build on a case study, if you like, is that I used to work in the science and tech sector, coach and mentor people within the science and tech sector. We'd have spin outs from Oxford University. And I can remember a conversation with this guy that he was a researcher, academic, and he was complaining that the researchers he'd hired 5 researchers. None of them were as good as he. None of them were doing the right research. None of them were doing it at the speed that he was doing it, et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, why did you hire them? He said, well, I'm now the business owner. I'm now the entrepreneur. Went, okay. So what are you doing? He said, coming back to the point I said earlier, he's now managing people. He's now doing the business development. He's now doing the numbers. Well, he didn't like numbers. He didn't like managing people. And he hated picking up the phone to speak to people. I said, do you think you've hired yourself in the wrong job? So one of the questions I always ask my clients now is, if you were to hire yourself in your own business and pay that person what you want to pay yourself as a reward for running this business yourself, what would you truly hire yourself for? And ultimately, that often brings out where they need to ultimately spend their energy and spend their time and hire people to do the other things.
I love that insight because I think that's a lot of founders complain about all of the stuff they do. And it's like that stuff costs you in terms of what you're not doing. You're not doing the high level strategic stuff. And, I hear it all the time. Oh, I can't afford to hire somebody. But then it's, oh, and I missed my kids' football practice or soccer practice, whatever. You really don't recognize that your time is not free, because I think that's the biggest faulty number I hear a lot is, well, I did it myself. It's cheaper and faster. Is it?
It's quite often, People, again, because again, looking at the numbers, they look at the numbers in their balance sheet or on their profit and loss account or in their bank account more so. And ultimately, oh, look, I've saved some money by employing that person. They don't look at the hidden cost, which is their time. And, you've been very honest, Jeff, in terms of what you shared, in terms of, your example was a classic, is in terms of you hired a lot of people around you, but ultimately they sucked up your time. So ultimately, the hidden cost was your time, in terms of not only in terms of your time and what it cost you, but ultimately the acquisition cost of what you could have acquired with applying that time elsewhere. So again, very honest reflection that you made, which plays very nicely into what we're sharing here. Is that ultimately, if you'd have gone and hired an A player to go and do whatever they could have done for you, they'd have probably been up and running within a couple of weeks of an induction and some training from you. I talk about a matrix called the skill and will matrix, and you hire people with high will, not quite the high skill, but again, you want to basically develop their skill to get them up in that top quartile and keep them in that top quartile. And that often is A players. And we know that if you hire A players, it attracts more A players. It detracts the non-A players, because ultimately, you first of all lead what you breed, and then when you breed the right people, they breed the culture for you. Whereas if you hire the wrong people, your next hire will come in copy. Oh, well, if you get away with that, then I can get away with that, or whatever the culture may be, for example.
Well, it's funny that you use that word, because I'm obsessed with corporate culture, and I have a friend who works in a very large international organization, and mediocrity is a stretch for their team. Like, seriously, everybody figures out what average is and then tries to do less. And they think the secret is to hire new people and just keep adding, because, when you've got people who are at 50% capacity, you need more people to get the same level of work done. And unfortunately, they tried to bring in a couple of A players, but the A players came in, took a look at the mess, and said, I'm going somewhere else.
100%. 100%. And I think quite often when we lose people, from a cultural perspective, we lose the wrong people. The people that we wanted to lose stay on the bus, and the people we wanted to get off the bus, stay on it.
I always thought the saying, what is it? Hire slow and fire fast. I thought it was cruel, but now with years of experience, it's like, nope, you're doing everybody a favor, because if that person wasn't meant to be on the bus, you're just taking them further out of their own way. So time to pull over, let them off.
Yeah. And again, I think if we hire the wrong people, we get sort of stuck in this cycle of supporting them and feel that we can't let them go, and we need to be loyal to them because this is our baby, and it's particularly at startup, this is our baby, and the people I've introduced to the baby is my family, and now the family, I can't be nasty to my family, etc. When we get that realization is actually the reason why you're running this business is because of your own personal goals. Actually, you don't really have a relationship with these people, and these people will probably trample over you as much as you trample over them if you need to. So ultimately, be really mindful about what return on investment you need from your people.
I think that's the key, is knowing the return on investment. Now, you mentioned hiring A players. I'm absolutely fascinated, because I see a lot of recruiters saying that there's no good candidates out there, and I see a lot of good candidates saying there's no good jobs out there. So clearly those two people aren't looking in the same direction. What would be your advice for finding and hiring that A player?
First of all, find somebody who's not looking for a job, because ultimately they're in most cases they're not the A players, because there's a reason why they're looking for a new job. Either they've fallen out with who's hiring them right now, or direction of travel, or they can't be bothered to do the work that their current owner is asking them. I think ultimately it's about profiling in the first place. What do you really want? So coming back to your point, Jeff, it's really, really important to have that clarity about return on investment. What's the outcomes that you want this person to achieve? Not just in terms of high level, job description, i.e. I need you to pick up the phone and call cold contacts, but actually I need you to make a certain amount of sales. And ultimately you can then play that back through the interview process with that clarity, because ultimately if you play back with clarity what you're looking for, if somebody believes that they can't deliver it in themselves, they don't believe they're the A player, they will again bail out themselves. So again, it starts really with ultimate clarity. And I think sometimes you find the A player not in your industry. So, for example, you may be looking for a brilliant engineer or a brilliant salesperson, but actually they're not selling in your industry at the moment. But if you can look at the skill set that you're looking for in terms of the skill set, personality set, and also the return on investment you require from hiring that person, again, where do they hang out? Where do they? It's a little bit like marketing in general, isn't it? From a marketing perspective for our business, we're trying to identify who we're trying to pull towards us with interest, i.e., our avatars, our customers, and then we're going to hit them with a sales message or a value proposition. Likewise, when we're trying to hire, we're in effect promoting our business. Why do you want to come and work for my business? Why am I the right place to hire you as the A player?
I love that. And I think that's something a lot of people miss is, and I've seen this in large entities. They're like, okay, well, we got 1,000 resumes. Here's the top 100. We're going to interview 10. Okay, we'll hire the best of these 10, which to me always seems like a bit of a roll of the dice, as it were. So,
Yeah, and I think again, without the clarity about the return on investment and the high level responsibilities that you want, you cull your list in the wrong way. You might, I would say if you start with 1,000, you've got to get it down to probably a dozen people maximum in terms of who you're going to interview, or otherwise that's going to be a time process. But when you see people culling just for the sake of culling, not with purpose, so understanding, what's your top 10 factors that you're looking for in an individual, and then cull on that basis, again, just gives you that clarity about who you're then going to interview is going to be more likely to be your A player.
I love the clarity point, and I'm fascinated because a lot of people say I serve all people, and I talk to people and ask, what's the role? Who are you looking for? And I firmly believe in personality types, and there are certain people who should be in sales. There are certain people who should not be. And I'm fascinated when people say, well, they seemed like a fit. Well, what was your criteria for seemed? It felt a little touchy-feely random, but
Mm-hmm. Yep. Strikes lazy to me.
now one thing I want to pull something out because you feel like a book nerd to me, and I think you and I are going to have some fun with this. One of the things I see the most in startups and quite frankly really established is the I serve everyone. I want to be a broad generalist, and everybody quotes some statistics saying generalists are better. Yet the ones I see succeeding, and I'm staring weirdly at numbers, and the ones I see hitting 10 million and above all seem to have this weird focus on a niche or specialty. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
100% with that thought process, Jeff. I think ultimately, if we try and talk to everybody, we end up talking to nobody. If you think about your website and you're trying to talk to everybody on your website, if you or I go and land on that website, I want a message that's going to speak specifically to me and engage me rather than anybody. And again, working back in the science and tech sector, it was really interesting to see businesses that were trying to attract science and tech businesses to work with, because in Oxfordshire, it's where I'm based, Oxfordshire, UK, is people want to work with the universities, they want to work with the spin-outs. But you'd see service businesses approaching science and tech businesses without any messages that was resonating with science and tech businesses. It was just a very generic message. Whereas the people that were clever and they had understood that that was going to be their niche factor, they really understood the buzzwords. They understood the language that would attract and engage and get eyes on their business. And I think the power of the niche and the specialism really allows you to really hone down and say, actually, if I'm a business coach, people will still find me as a business coach through referral, through search. But actually, the people I want to pull towards me with my relevant messaging is going to be the sectors that I want to work with. And again, that's where niche and specialisms come through.
I love it. Well, I could talk to you all day, Mike, but I want to be mindful of your time. I promised your people I would get you in and out on time. So what does it look like to work with you? Who should be reaching out to you as the personal brand, the entrepreneur's mentor? Who do you like to work with?
Yeah, I think we work ultimately with established businesses in the main. We also obviously work with startup businesses that often have got some level of investment behind them, that feel that they can invest in mentoring and coaching. It's not a cost from that perspective. I work in two ways. I've got my own personal brand, where basically everything is bespoke and personalized to the individual's challenge and problem that they're facing. I also work with an organization called the Entrepreneur Circle on a program called the Master Plan, which is a very unique 9-step program that takes people through, if they haven't got a specific knowledge, challenge or something to work through, it takes them through a particular reverse engineered structure from where they are now to the success that they define themselves.
I love it. I love it. And where can people go to connect with you, learn more about your book, learn more about you?
So probably two best places are, first of all, the website, which is entrepreneursmentor.co.uk, or through LinkedIn, which is Mike Foster Oxford.
I love it. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining me all the way from Oxford. And it was a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on and for some great questions.